I'm DC Cullinane. I'm the CEO and founder of ThinkingVOICE, and we provide lead management services for lead generators that are looking to generate higher revenue. And what we do is we take those leads into our system and we send them to call floors. Call floors will call and vet the lead over the phone to verify all the information that's been filled out in the form, and then to ask them a few additional questions, such as maybe their area of interest as far as a degree for education as an example. And then we route that lead to the advertiser after it's been fully vetted over the phone. In some cases, we'll do a warm transfer directly to either a school or to an aggregator, someone that represents a bunch of schools, or in other cases, we'll just do a data post to the buyer of the lead. So we provide a level of insulation to confirm and qualify the lead before they're purchased by the lead buyer. Well, the conversion rates for our clients are very high because we're vetting and we're filtering out the leads that are truly not interested. And internet lead generation, in many cases, there'll be what I call hand wavers. People who don't fill out a long form, maybe they're in a co-reg process, and so they'll wave their hand and say, yeah, maybe I'm interested in that. Well, what we do is we'll take that data, maybe they're interested in going back to school, but we'll call that lead right away, and we'll verify, in fact, that they are interested. So the conversion rates for the leads that we route through to our advertisers are extremely high. Industry rates, as far as the scrub, which would mean I sold you 100 leads, you scrubbed out 10%, I only got paid for 90. Our scrub rates are 0, and that's primarily due to the fact that we're vetting the lead on the phone before the advertiser buys them. On the same token, we're dialing a lot of records. Every day we process anywhere from 20 to 40,000 unique records that come into the system. And so we dial all those records, try to get a hold of those leads, and we might reach 20%, 30%. The rest are people that, quite frankly, might not be interested at all or don't want to talk. And so they would fall on the floor as what we would call an unbillable lead, or a lead that was a hand waver who was not able to be converted. Well, that's an important part of the process too as well, because I would say that when you have a considered purchase, such as going back to school, or a very heavy consideration that you have to make before you make the decision to do so, it requires some hand-holding along the way to really talk with you about the school programs that may be available, or in the case of elder care services, you might not know enough about elder care services, but yet you want elder care services for your loved one, your parent, or someone in your family that needs those services. So we can help guide you through that process, talk with you about the services that are available, educate you a little bit, and then confirm that in fact you could use some of those services before we route that lead over to the advertiser. So we really do insulate, if you will, the advertiser from the tire kickers, which will always be part of the process. I think even using our services, we'll route people through that won't convert right away. They may need more education. They may need to take 30, 60, 90 days before they make their decision because other family members are part of that decision. So for categories where the purchase decision is very long, voice interactions do add a lot of value, and they'll set the lead up for the expectation of what is about to happen next. Well, I would almost say that Coca-Cola, in their effort with their rewards program, which is where they collect personal information from people who drink Coke, which arguably is everybody, and they've, for the last, I think, 3 or 4 years been running that program. And that would be what I would say is an initial foray by a major brand into getting closer to the consumer, becoming more familiar with the consumer as far as the consumer's details, first name, last name, where they live, maybe their phone number, their email address. These are things that most brands have shied away from because they deal through a channel, grocery store. They just want to see that they sell 1 million units a month. They're not necessarily interested in who or where bought it, but as much as that it was purchased. So I think as these larger brands do look to use the internet, you'll find circumstances like that where they'll find a good use of the channel. I would think that some major brands may have very little to no interest in the space in the next couple of years, because even if they do have that information, for instance, Kraft macaroni and cheese, even if they do have your personal information, what are they going to do with it? They could do a mailer, maybe a discount program or a couponing, but most people end up going in the store anyhow. So I think I think there's a lot of jostling internally in these major companies and brands to determine how do they use lead data, how do they work with the lead data, how do they do it in a way that's complementary to their brand. So I think that Coke is a good example of a company that's begun to do that, and you'll see other companies find their niche in their space. But our household brands, Procter & Gamble, things like this, they're experts at what I would almost call unmeasurable advertising channels, which are comforting for their brand because it creates some awareness. And they'll help a considered purchase that might occur later within the store because they'll remember the commercial. So they're more emotional advertisers. They're trying to connect with you emotionally as opposed to making a direct sale, right? Very different worlds. Direct marketing advertisers, and then you have branded advertisers who don't necessarily focus as much on the direct marketing as they do about the branding of the product. Well, I would say that there are number one, there's a tremendous amount of fragmentation in the advertising channel where you have so many choices. Online, there's so many choices. Just online, there's so many choices. And then you add to that television, radio, traditional media, billboards, out of home, that it almost is mind-boggling. Newspaper, magazines, yellow pages, right? I mean, it's just overwhelming. So what I would say is that what agencies do a good job of is they unify the channel, right? And that's what comforts the advertiser. I've got $10 million to spend in the quarter. I'm not going to go and manage the spend to every one of these disparate channels. I'll go through an agency that can help collect and aggregate the purchasing across those channels and then bring me some data back. These agencies have controlled majority of the dollars that are spent. And agencies now are shifting the way that they expose the data to the advertiser by telling them the online channel generated this much results, this much traffic, this many people filled out forms or gave their information. Television channel, here's the media that we bought. Here's the audience that you targeted. We think it created a lift. Not quite sure, can't measure it per se, but they're unifying those channels, and what I think is happening is the big advertisers are beginning to realize that the online channel is extremely measurable, for better or for worse, because in many cases it can be for worse. When you can measure a channel as extensively as you can measure the online channel, it can expose some ugliness related to consumers that you would consider to be your customers, about how they feel about your brand directly. In addition to that, what lead generators would do to generate the leads that come into your system. And I only bring that up because I won't mention the satellite companies, but some major branded satellite companies have entirely pulled their internet advertising co-op dollars and focused the co-op dollars on the traditional media. And that's a tendency, they have a tendency to do that because they can't keep track of the thousands of dealers that they have that spend the money on the internet. And they used to give the money, they used to co-op the dollars, but then they would see how those people were spending the money, and they didn't approve of it. They would buy keywords of their competitors, they would take them to landing pages that offered incentives, and so they were engaged in these activities where they were trying to get people to give their personal information so they could call them, let's say, or convert them to a customer, right? And they'll do anything they can to make that happen. The brand doesn't necessarily want that because it can run amok. You know, it's the Wild West. You get a lot of bizarre activities that may occur that might not be considered okay by the brand.